All right, good news, important news, big news. Hashtag Pulitzer. Shefty reports Roger Goodell has been vaccinated. And what? And will be allowed to hug the players who attend Thursday night's draft. Got to get that bear hug. Got to get lifted off the ground. Got to get the Christian Wilkins flying bump.
That was my favorite.
You know, for these guys who have grown up watching it every year and truly are brainwashed to think it is some sort of an honor and a privilege to be told. Have we done this before?
No, but I agree with your stance, but the brainwash thing, like, man,
they are brainwashed.
I know.
Well, they are.
I know.
They are.
Who was the running back that drove back like all night in order to be at Alabama's pro day, even though he wasn't working out? That to me, that is some brainwashing right there. Yeah, that was Najee Harris. We don't need to do that, dude. You don't need to do that. I don't know.
It's an honor and a privilege to be told where you are going to be living and working and who you're going to be working with, even if that organization is going to ruin your career. Because we know that happens. We know that, especially with quarterback. You go to the wrong team to start your career, that's it. It's over. Kaput. So anyway, there's nothing they can do about it. That's the one thing I've sensed over the years. The players accept it because they are firm believers in focusing only on the things that they can control. They can't control where they're going to be drafted. They can't control that the rule is they don't get to pick the team gets to pick them. Joey Bosa is the only one who ever reacted to that question. I haven't asked it to every guy because I've sensed that the answer 99.9% of the time is going to be, I can only control what I can control. But Joey Bosa, Myles, however many years ago it was, 5 years ago, did say, you got a point. And I have thought of that. Just like I got to choose my college, I should be able to choose my team. And they should.
Well, and especially if they are a good player, right? Like Joey Bosa is basically locked into the Chargers until the Chargers say, all right, we're done with you. All right, if you are a good quarterback, you are basically locked in with that team until such time that the team says, we are done with you. And if you are a first round pick, then that means that the team has 5 years instead of your 4 years on the rookie contract at least. And then they could maybe franchise you a couple more times. So that's 7 years of your life that are basically surrendered to the team that happens to select you in the first round of the draft if you are a good player, and you don't really get any choice in that. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with you, but I just thought it was funny that you started it with the brainwashing aspect of it.
This time of year, I can't help myself.
I don't think it's just this time of year, Mike, man. I know I haven't been working here all that long, but I think I know that.
But why, Myles, of all the people out there who cover the National Football League, and there are thousands now, how is it that I'm the only one who will say that repeatedly? I've converted some people over the years. Stats Guerrera, who used to produce the morning show. At first, when I explained it to him, he said, I'm crazy, I'm nuts, I'm wrong. And after about 4 years of hearing me all the time, I finally wore him down. But and I don't consume a lot of media, but I'd be paying attention. I'd know if there was somebody else out there who believes what I believe. Everybody else is just shake the pom-poms for the draft. The draft is great. The draft is awesome. Don't do anything to change the draft. And for me, and then we're going to move on because we got other stuff to get to. I think part of it was when you have a child who gets close to the age of the guys who are being drafted, all of a sudden you see your child in the incoming players and you realize that, they're not fully grown men. They're not fully formed adults. And if I was the parent of a player who's entering the draft right now and we lived in an NFL city and that team had a need at the position my son plays, but my son had to just hope that this arbitrary random circle puts him in it's wrong. He should be allowed to. It's like in no other industry does this happen. I'm done. I quit. I don't quit. Some of you wish I would quit. I quit the topic for now. But I want people to understand that from the player's perspective, there really is a problem with this. There just isn't anything they can do about it, so they submit because what's your other choice? You can't bang your head against the wall. You want to play football, that's the way it works. All right, fill in the blank. With the 27th and now 31st pick in the draft, courtesy of the Orlando Brown trade to Kansas City, the Ravens will what, Myles?
I think the Ravens will pick a wide receiver and an edge rusher. And I don't necessarily know in which order they'll do it, but I think those are two positions that the Ravens clearly need to get better at. Look, they lost Matthew Judon. He is now with the New England Patriots, and that's the guy that led the team in sacks the last 2 seasons. But, the Ravens are the kind of defense where they can get pressure anywhere, but I think they could use one of these bona fide, the real good guys at pass rusher that they really haven't necessarily had since Terrell Suggs left. Zadarius Smith, he of course is now with the Packers. So I think if they can get somebody like that with one of these 2 first-round picks, they'd be very happy. And I don't think Sammy Watkins is enough of an upgrade at wide receiver. That's definitely a position that they need to address too.
I'm going to be far more specific than that. With picks 27 and 31, the Ravens will package them together, trade up to number 11 with the New York Giants, because why not? Dave Gettleman seems to be desperate to trade down just to prove to everyone that he's capable of doing it. And with the 11th overall pick in the draft, they'll take the best receiver available. And at that point, it quite possibly will be Devontae Smith. Wouldn't that be something if the new receiver in Baltimore is 166-pound Devontae Smith, to be the bookend on the outside with Hollywood Brown, and then Sammy Watkins, the speedster, work in the middle from the slot? That passing game could be revolutionized quickly.
It could be, but look, I mean, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Is that going to be fleecing Dave Gettleman, man? I think that's one aspect of it. But if that were to happen, that is some serious speed. Like, the Chiefs have speed. That's some speed to rival the Chiefs for sure.
And really, when you're the Ravens and the free agents, other than the ones that don't have any other viable options, with all apologies to Sammy Watkins, but it's not like he had viable options, the only way you're going to get a good receiver is in the draft. When the player can't say, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to play in the offense that never throws the football," although they throw it some, not nearly as much as other teams do. All right, the New England Patriots will select a what with the 15th overall pick?
Okay, so I think that they will select a defensive back. I think they'll select a cornerback, because I think that that's going to allow them to trade Stephon Gilmore, because it just seems like the Patriots have done so many things that are not necessarily in character when it comes to spending this offseason in free agency. I think that would be something that would put them back in line with where we usually feel like the Patriots are, because once they get a veteran that it's, starts to get a little bit high priced, and then you also had some injury concerns last year with Gilmore, I think that would allow them to comfortably move on from Gilmore, maybe get a 2nd round, 3rd round pick back for him. And then the Patriots would probably be more in line with what at least I think of how the Patriots would act in the offseason and in the draft, Mike.
They have depth at the cornerback position, but this is likely the last year for J.C. Jackson, who got a 2nd-round tender as a restricted free agent. He'll be unrestricted next year. He'll likely walk away. What are you going to do with Gilmore? Even if you have depth, you're going to need that guy. I think best corner available at 15 is what they're going to do, and I'm not a big believer in them trading up. I know a lot of people are fascinated by that possibility to move up for a quarterback. I submit that they love Cam Newton, and they want to see how far Cam Newton can take them with the benefit of a full offseason, no COVID, and better weapons available to him. And that apparently, Myles, is a very hot take for the opinion generators in the New England area, because they all are convinced Cam Newton sucks. And if you say that the Patriots really like Cam Newton, they think you're crazy, apparently.
Well, I mean, maybe that's just the reason why I don't necessarily think that Cam Newton sucks, but I also just don't tend to think that they are convinced, the Patriots are, that Cam Newton is going to be the guy that can get them back to the promised land. So maybe I'm reading too much out of Boston, and that's just influencing my opinion too much.
One thing we need to keep in mind about Cam Newton, he has the perfect personality to follow Tom Brady. And that part has been overlooked in all of it. But when he walked into the locker room after Brady walked out, it galvanized guys. guys want to follow him. They want to get behind him. I think the COVID thing last year really screwed it up, and it's going to be a very different year for the Patriots and for Cam Newton in 2021. All right, the quarterback who could suffer an Aaron Rodgers-type slide is who, Myles?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you think is the second best quarterback in the draft, I guess, because wasn't that the whole thing about Aaron Rodgers, right? But the guys that come to mind for me would be Trey Lance, first of all, because there's not a lot of tape on him. And so he is a pure projection. So that's why I think that he could easily slide. But, I mean, if you tend to think that these teams at the top of the draft don't like Justin Fields as much, then it would be him. Because if he doesn't go, number 4 overall or number 3 overall to San Francisco, depending on which, betting favorites you looked at in the last week and a half, then yeah, I mean, it could be Justin Fields that starts to slide, and you don't really know when that slide is going to end because in theory, he seems like the kind of guy who teams should really be high on, but all of these different teams have different kind of evaluators than we might be in the media on the outside, Mike.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Peter King that 5 quarterbacks can be taken in the top 10, and I don't think any of them will slide. But if any will slide, I think it's Justin Fields. And I'm not saying it should happen, but between Fields and Lance, it would be one of them. And based upon just the overall assortment and collection of reports and opinions and mock drafts, not that I pay attention to those, but sometimes you can't avoid them. I feel like if it's anyone, it's Justin Fields. And then I think it gets very interesting as to who's number 6, number 7, number 8, which of this second cut of quarterbacks ends up waiting the longest. And also, when you've got Chris Sims putting Kellen Mond ahead of both Justin Fields and Trey Lance, is there a chance that if Fields slides, it's actually Mond that goes before Justin Fields, or even Trey Lance for that matter? That would be something if it happens. Right, the one draft prospect we're not talking about enough is who?
See, I think it's Jalen Waddle. And I think it's kind of interesting because, I mean, when you just brought up the Ravens and trading up, talked about Devontae Smith. And everybody's been talking about Devontae Smith for good reason. Look, he won the Heisman Trophy, and there are these sort of questions, if you will, about his weight and all that. And he's 166 pounds, which I'm a lot heavier than 166 pounds. So take with that what you will. But I think Jalen Waddle was so good for that offense. I mean, if you look at his numbers, man, I mean, he has over 120 yards receiving in the first 4 games of the season before he gets hurt, then works his way back to get on the field for the national championship game. If you're talking about a guy who really loves football, and obviously all coaches in the NFL want to see that, I think that's what that demonstrates. So I think Jalen Waddle, sort of like Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy last year, where I think we all kind of thought Jeudy would be the first wide receiver off the board. Maybe he should have been, maybe he shouldn't have been, I don't know. But at least from Alabama, right? So this is kind of maybe that same situation where Waddle could go before Devontae Smith, and it wouldn't necessarily surprise me.
I believe that if the Dolphins use the 6th overall pick on a receiver and Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith are all there, they'll take Waddle. So okay. I think you're onto something. Even over Chase. I think the opt-out, at least from the perspective of the Dolphins, I think that may hurt Chase and push the needle toward Jalen Waddle. For me, and I'm going to stay in Miami, but not with the local pro team, the local college team, Gregory Rousseau, who we had on the program last week at one point, there was that interesting effort by someone to muddy the waters on Gregory Rousseau earlier this week when Ian Rappaport, who's clearly not a draftnik, but he had a report about what a tough evaluation it is, and big, tall, skinny guy, and questions about this and questions about that. He opted out last year. When his agent comes out and says that multiple teams have told him that this guy's a first-round pick, unless in advance Drew Rosenhaus went to Gregory Rousseau and said, I'm going to tell a big, fat lie, and it's not true, and no team has told me you're going to be a first-round pick. If this is the truth, then he does know it, and he does trust it. And one thing that people don't realize, the agents who have relationships with multiple teams, and they have relationships because they represent players throughout the league, teams will tell them the truth. And I'm fascinated to see where Gregory Rousseau goes, because if multiple teams are regarding this guy as a first rounder, that means he's going to go higher than people realize. So I want to see where he goes, and I want to see what he can do, because I think he can be a very good pass rusher in the NFL, Myles.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he can do as well. And I think this is going to be the thing with all of these guys that chose to opt out of the 2020 season. And general managers, I think, at least have been mostly responsible in saying, look, you've got to take these guys on a case-by-case basis, because a lot of guys did have very good reasons to opt out. So when it comes to that, and then you see, what exactly this guy has put on tape, how he looked in the workouts, all of that is going to be very fascinating, especially for an edge rusher and where he is going to go in that first round.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.